Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's now time for another Global Review podcast. The moment has arrived. It's that time of year. It's that time of unit again, I guess. For the Global Review podcast, this is our third one we've ever done, but it will be on the Unit 5 Islamic world. So what we're going to start by going over is how Islam took place originally in the Middle East. Then we'll talk about the West African kingdoms, then the East African Swahili coast region, and then finally Islam in India. Then we'll take a look at Islam and Sikhism and the best strategies for how to study further, because I know we are doing this podcast pretty darn early. Some of you have the quiz on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday of this upcoming week, I believe. And yes, we're going to do it. We did it a day earlier than last time, but again, that is not the point. But we will now continue. Let's get started. So, of course, the Middle East. We start with the Middle East. And right now, how did the religion spread? That's one of the big things. So pretty much what happened is in the Middle East, it spread a lot by conquest. It was significantly aided by the spread of Islam. And the thing was the Byzantine and Persian empires. Those were the empires that were in place as the Islamic Empire was just rising up. They were pretty much on the down end. They were pretty tired from years and years of fighting. There was also a traditional Bedouin religion in place originally, and that religion was very tribal, very there's a small groups, small tribes that go around conducting targeted raids for food, water, because obviously water there in the desert is pretty hard. Then Muhammad comes along, or hard to come by, and so then Muhammad comes along and gets a huge following based on a simple principles that obviously would later be formed the religion of Islam. And I mean, they pretty much gained a lot of strength through missionaries, or people pretty much seeing their work in action. People from the Islamic religion coming over and telling other people about the success of the religion. And pretty much what happened was, if you remember back to the beginning of the unit, it was Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, was banished from Islam, from his hometown of Mecca originally. He was sent back to Medina, where he gained a small following, practiced and formulated the ways of Islam. Then, as an army of just around 300, came back to reclaim Mecca as its own and turn it into an Islamic religion. And, well, they didn't have a lot of odds because they were going up against the entire army back in Mecca, which was very huge. But they were outnumbered at such a high ratio. They kept fighting, and eventually they won. They took control of the Islamic, the old Bedouin hotspot, where, of course, there was the Bedouin hotspot of Mecca, where, of course, there was the Kaaba, which is kind of that big black square that so many people make the Hajj or the pilgrimage to in Islam. And it's a big journey. It's a big trip that they have to make. It reunites them, and it brings them all to their beliefs. And people talk. They exchange ideas, and they talk about how things are going in their lives. It's a pilgrimage that once in their lives every Muslim must make. And it was a big deal, as then they kept fighting. They kept trying to reclaim their city, their old city. Muhammad did, and eventually, as they kept fighting, they kept pushing on. They had little bits of success, and then people surrounding in the other Bedouin tribes around the area, they were shocked. They were like, "How is this dude having any success? He's like a nobody, and he doesn't really have any armies. This must be the hand of God at work pushing him. And there must be something divine about this dude who just come out of nowhere and is suddenly taking down one of the biggest cities in the region." And so they joined him. And by the time Muhammad eventually took back Mecca, he outnumbered the people who are outnumbering him by a huge margin originally. So that was a big deal. Then that Islamic army spread quickly. The Byzantines and the Persians, as I mentioned, they were on the down end. They were pretty tired from years of fighting. The Byzantines were particularly tyrannical and weak in their ruling style, which made the Muslim army feel like liberators. People are like, oh my gosh, it's the Muslim army. They're coming to invade us, but that's a good thing because I don't want the rulers that I currently have. The people who were saying that were hymns or Syrians who were just like, get me out of this original religion here. And a lot of people, at this time, religion was used as kind of a way of life. In the Arabic region, Islam was. Prayers were called 5 times a day. Islamic Sharia law was pretty harsh, and Islam was kind of a way of life in Arabic in Middle Eastern countries. They follow the 5 pillars, which we'll get to in a minute. And there was a lot of cultural diffusion in the Abbasid Caliphate, which took hold a little bit after kind of everyone was done conquering things. Here, after they kind of took control of the whole region. That kind of happened after everyone was done doing everything kind of settled down. All the fighting, all the claiming of territory by the Islamic Empire, that settled down. And then we had the Abbasid Empire, which really moved toward a lot of scientific achievements, cultural achievements, and a lot of big strides, some of which we still use today. So there's a lot of cultural diffusion because all people from all around the world came to this place in Iraq called Baghdad. It was kind of the centered, that was where all the cultural diffusion was taking place. Scholars worldwide came to study in the House of Wisdom. They drew on past philosophers such as Aristotle and Plato, and all the people pretty much back to the Greek ages, and it was one of the wealthiest, most fabulous cities, rival places like Rome in its kind of opulence and wealth there. They faced a lot of problems they had to work out due to their meteoric rise of the empire, but they did make some pretty outrageously amazing achievements. They formed an Islamic religious calendar. They measured the circumference of the entire earth. They also developed algebra and algebraic formulas. They developed some of the basic math and scientific principles, including stuff like medicine, that we still use today. This was really the only main golden age in the region. The Abbasid Golden Age was a period of unprecedented growth and prosperity in the region. So there was really no other golden age at any time in real period that we live in at the moment. That we studied in the current Unit 5. But in the West African kingdoms, the religion spread through conquest to North Africa through the Islamic army that conquered a lot of the Middle Eastern and Arabic regions. They now kind of spread towards the tip of Egypt, past that skinny Red Sea, and spilled out into the area of North Africa. And Islamic armies came strong through the Arabian Peninsula, and then more West African leaders saw their dominance, and soon some people converted. Some of their leaders saw the dominance of the Islamic army and was like, hey, I think I want to become Islam now. And they converted, as did the people. They changed their religion to Islam. That turned the tide and helped spread the Islamic religion. This also helped them become more popular with their subjects, who were probably like, hey, this Islam thing is pretty cool. So, for example, Mansa Musa was a big guy over there. He was one of the first African Islamic kings who really helped spread the religion, did some pretty good things down there in West Africa. North Africa was dominated by well-trained and the really effective Islamic army. That helped them really spread out. And it was really, here's pretty much the basic area. East Africa, which we'll get to in a minute, is all about trade. Islam spread there through trade. North Africa spread through conquest. Think about kind of the surge of the people in the Arabic Peninsula. If you know your geography, the Arabic Peninsula is kind of that big, basically rectangular landmass there. It kind of spread through the tip and into the northern part of Africa, all the way to Spain at some points. And it really spread there. Then Western African people saw it and said, hey, I think this Islamic thing is going to be a good idea. I want to be conquered here. And then, that's pretty much how Islam spread at all those points. In East Africa, there was a ton of trade. So pretty much trade on the East Coast African and Arab traders traversed kind of the Red Sea. They went back and forth, and if I were to pull up a map here, you could see kind of an incredible kind of linking. They traversed the people in Africa and the people in the what is now Saudi Arabia and the Arabic Peninsula. They kind of traversed all through that, even going as far as places like back and forth through the Red Sea to places along the Swahili coast of Africa, and they went back and forth, and that helped spread the Islamic ideas into a place that really had pretty much traditional African religion, and they were like, whoa, what is this new Islam thing? We have to get onto it. So it spread through trade. They were trading goods and also trading some ideas there in the east coast of Africa, which is called the Swahili coast. Religion was used there for political purposes there, as the growth of the Muslim population attracted more people to the coast. Muslim government started in the Swahili coast. Pretty much what happened there was his sultan was kind of like the lord of the place, would appoint two powerful officials called a waziz and an amir. The government included also officials who oversaw trade, taxed shipments, and regulated the port, docks, and trade. While this was no golden age, it was pretty much everything was peaceful, everything was all right, but there was no real major advancements that we saw from that point forward. So, conquests in India, as we now move on to the end of the unit, something you may have recently remembered to study at the beginning of February, which is lesson 508 and homework 508 if you go by the system of Miss Jacobs. It was kind of all about Islam and India and the Mughal Empire. Conquests were really a big part in India. A brutal campaign led by Mongolian sultans who converted to Islam. Really brutal army campaigns. 17 campaigns conquered large swaths of northern and northeastern India in 17 aggressive military campaigns. They were aggressive and violent, and they treated the Hindu Indians who were already living in the country as conquered people. And that fight between the influx of Islamic folks and the Hindu folks who are already there, that's a fight that still remains pretty strong today. Although that wasn't totally discussed on the quiz, it will be a big deal. It was one of the parts, the part that we learned about this period of the conflict was one of the Islam in India was one of the more aggressive parts of history. It was not a golden age for sure. It was a really aggressive time and a big time for conflict and use of military there. So peasants were slaughtered at some points. Eventually they were taxed, and the religion at the time was Hindu, so the Islamic conquerors were pretty much hated. They were like, I don't like this. We have our religion. We're good, thank you. We don't need you right now. We don't need you at the moment. But it's okay. So yeah, they didn't have much of a choice. So let's go over the founding principles here of Islam. So the messenger, the big guy who founded things it was Moses in Israel, and Jesus in Christianity, and it was Muhammad in Islam. It was all about making a self-sustaining society that respects all and follows Islamic law, and you follow the 5 major Muslim principles. Those were a pretty big deal, and one of them was faith. There is only one God, and that is Allah. That was the big point of things. Praying to the God Allah 5 times a day was a big part. The call to prayer, praying in the direction of Mecca, that was very important. 5 times a day was the big deal. Alms was a charitable tax. That was part 3. It was supposed to go to people who were more less fortunate than you were. Fasting was not eating for the month of Ramadan. Well, at least for certain times. I do realize you cannot eat for a month. Fasting was during special religious periods. And in Ramadan, you cannot eat for the entire month straight, or you would die, but you eat very small portions there. Fasting was something to show respect to Allah, and during the holy month, where things really went down for the Muslim religion. And then pilgrimage, we mentioned before, the Hajj journey to Mecca. Every Muslim, every Islamic person must take this in their life. They need to go to travel, pilgrimage, obviously a religious journey. Take the plane, the train, the car, wherever you happen to live, across the world. Millions of Muslims do this every year. They come, they pray to the Kaaba. there in Mecca, which is